Good afternoon. You're watching Up to Data, a retail news chat show in which we talk about all things data, technology and digital transformation. And today on the show from the London Project, we have Anisha Oberoi joining us from Secret Skin. Thanks, Anisha.
Thank you for having us.
Great. First things first, Anisha, tell me a little bit about your brand, Secret Skin, that I've been hearing so much about of late.
Well, we started 8 months ago when we launched the platform. So essentially, Secret Skin is a sustainable beauty tech platform where we connect new to the region brands from various parts of the world that are clean and conscious to consumers in the Middle East. We have a strong environmental and social impact focus because the mission is to raise the awareness of women's health and mindful consumption through the narrative of beauty.
Great. So, Anisha, every startup that comes into the space, they have an objective of filling a gap. Which gap would you say you are trying to fill with this proposition?
When I moved here 2 years ago, I found that it was very difficult for me to discover clean beauty products in the region. I had no other option but to look outside of the UAE, and if I was looking at a brand in the UK or the US or a platform in Southeast Asia, not only would I have to wait 2 weeks to receive the product, but I was also paying between 55 and 85% overage in shipping and customs. And this frustrated me, and I saw an opportunity where what I really wanted to do was to give the customers in the UAE a very unique value proposition where everything was available in the same store, and it had a product offering across the different price points where the customer would be able to experience different brands from various parts of the world, locally fulfilled with flexible payment options and free shipping. We had free shipping when we first started. But the idea was to have a seamless customer experience and journey. Also realized that a lot of the businesses, and primarily born out of COVID, were online.
Yeah.
And also that beauty was declining and skincare had started to find an importance and a precedence in people's regimen as they were staying home, and the emphasis was on safety.
Yeah.
So I think it was a combination of things that arose and led to the point where I said, well, this is the right time to start something like this because it doesn't exist here.
Right. So from what you've explained, it sounds like Secret Skin is a marketplace, and it's a digitally data-driven marketplace. So how does it make the offerings that we have today any different?
It's not a marketplace. I would say it's, you can call it a hybrid marketplace. Okay. Because not anyone can list their products on Secret Skin. It's a very highly curated value proposition where we do a lot of research and talk to founders of conscious brands from around the world, read their reviews, sample their products, look at their certifications, look at their ingredients and their lab reports in order to determine whether it matches and subscribes to the very high bar that we have in terms of clean, because the word clean is so highly unregulated, whether it's clean or natural or green, it's very confusing for the customer. So we wanted to demystify it.
Right.
And 45% of our brands are exclusive and new to the region, which are not available on other platforms. But we have other unique offerings for the customer, like a plastic recycling program. For example, you can recycle your plastic, come back to the platform, earn equal reward points and shop.
Right.
And our mission to raise the awareness of women's health and mindful consumption through the narrative of beauty, it leads us to collaborate with other mission-aligned partners who have the same focus. So what I've tried to create is, because we have sustainable brands in our portfolio where sustainable activities are part of the value chain, whether it's sourcing or shipping or production, packaging, we offer the same experience to our customers.
Right.
So from end to end, we try and ensure that there are no breaks and that we're subscribing to that value proposition.
Right. So being an e-commerce company, you are obviously at a data advantage compared to your counterparts who only have physical retail outlets. So what exactly are you doing with this data that you now have access to?
Shruti, selling beauty and fashion is both an art and a science. You have to look at customer behavior patterns. You have to look at the target audience that you're exposing your product offering to. You have to look at their spend propensity. You have to look at the region that you're selling in, what is the per capita spend. You have to look at whether the product is available offline or is it only available online.
Yeah.
So there are lots of factors that give you a very scientific sort of a skeleton around how you should create your blueprint. I was fortunate that I had the Amazon bootcamp for 5 years.
Yeah.
So when we created the charter for Secret Skin, it was very data driven. We knew that we were going to look at everything from the behaviors of the customer to what were the regional influences, to what were the volume drivers, the image drivers, the best sellers in the particular categories that we were selling as well. And I think that over a period of time, this intel is very important for you, because then it's able to guide you as to what to focus on, whether it's marketing or how to have foresight when it's non-performing inventory, for example, or when you're looking at healthy sell-through rates, or when you're buying new product and inventory, what is it that you should focus on and what is it that just doesn't work in this region. So we use that data to hone the way that we're communicating to our audience. There are lots of learnings on a daily basis every time that a customer purchases an order. We know where our customers are coming from, we know how old they are, we know how much they're buying, we know what the average basket sizes are, we know how many products are in their basket. We also know that by introducing a bundle, for example, in one particular category that's doing really well, what will be the inflection point. So I think that it's an evolution and a journey over a period of time.
Right. Since you mentioned it, do you have a very specific target audience, or from the data that you're getting, is that how you're tailoring your offerings? Are you willing to expand that sort of audience base?
Well, we started by showcasing a very gender-neutral catalog. There are very few products that only our male audience can use. I did not want to have a for men and a for women differentiation on the platform. I was very focused on having a very inclusive community of clean crusaders, as it may be, who would want to experience the products. And I think that we definitely do see a pattern. Most of our clientele are women between the ages of 25 and 54. But given that we're very focused on the early adopters and the millennials, and definitely the products that are on the catalog are also products that the younger generation can use, we're now focusing our marketing activities on attracting early adopters.
Right. So one thing that comes along with data is, of course, personalization and the need for personalization. But there's just so many elements to that, because what happens with the data that is either voluntarily or involuntarily given by the customers is what retailers and brands and companies do with it, right? So at this point, have you nailed the mark when it comes to the right kind and the right levels of personalization for your customers?
At the moment, we have a lot of customers who reach out to us through Instagram and on email who ask us about a regimen. We have a beauty concierge feature where you can set up a Zoom call and talk to our beauty experts. And we've had a very significant success rate with that as well, because if you are tailoring the entire regimen to the customer on the basis of their skin concerns and their skin type, and then guiding them about what they should be buying, they end up buying more than 3 to 4 products, because that is what a regimen entails. We always want to do less than do more. We'll never suggest that you buy 12 products for your AM and PM routine, because a couple, we will always suggest that you alternate, which is the way it's always done, because there is an overlap. So we do get requests on Instagram, and people definitely WhatsApp our customer care in order to ask for recommendations, and we've seen that the more recommendations we give them, it confuses them. So we now, and this is something that I'm personally involved in, because the customer care will always check with me, I tailor make the regimen and send it to the customer, and the customer makes the purchase.
Right.
So personalization right now is very nascent in our experience for Secret Skin. But brands always have to strike the right balance between preserving privacy and innovating for new revenue streams. We've got a tech innovation in the pipeline which should be out in the next 2 weeks, where we're trying to integrate a community with the platform, so that recommendations are standardized for search.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to chat with other customers or look at reviews and also talk to experts in order to determine what is right for you. So personalization is at many levels. There's AI personalization as well, which you can enable via, say, an interface like the app. So whether it's AR or it's VR, whether it's the various innovations that are already there in the ecosystem, I think that lots of brands have done it, and it's all in the execution. They may not always succeed. So it's something that I'm still very curious to see. What will the future of that be? There's even genomics now, right? Because you're able to use genomics and the customer skin traits to determine, which is what they claim with their DNA test at home kits, that they're able to curate product recommendations on the basis of your personal needs. But how far it's scalable, and whether customers see an impact, and whether they see the performance and come back, and whether they scale because of efficacy, is still a question that remains to be seen.
A bunch of things that you mentioned, and I have so many questions on that. Let's start with you spoke about AI, and then of course AR, VR, all of that, right? So we've seen so many companies taking that on, and of course the bigger companies, because they have the capabilities, and they've also outrightly started calling themselves tech companies or data companies. Like Starbucks recently said that we're not a coffee company anymore, we're officially a data company. So they're all moving towards, being tech and data driven. So given that, and given that a lot of companies like Estee Lauder and L'Oreal, they're going into AR and VR full force, does that scare you a little bit, and does that make you feel like you probably need to jump on that bandwagon as well to survive?
It doesn't scare me. We're definitely not feeling intimidated, but we're feeling very inspired, because we have to pick and choose what is right for our product and right for the customer. At the moment, I'm able to look at the dwell time and the scroll depth of the customer on the platform. Whether it's the mWeb, so you look at the platform and scroll through your mobile interface, or whether you're on the desktop, I'm able to see through heat maps what customers are spending more time on, how are they engaging, what are they clicking on, and if there's an abandonment after the customer's added something to cart, how can we uplift that experience in order to have a better resonance and better conversion. So I think that it really is, again, tailor-made to what platform and product the brand is positioning themselves as. It doesn't scare us or intimidate us. Like I said, it inspires us, because I think companies like Modiface, when we launch into makeup, we're definitely interested to see how, given that it's COVID, and given that you may not be able to do any trials in the store, and yet we're selling makeup and people want to know how a shade is going to look on their cheek. We definitely are exploring the benefits of using an interface that tells the customer whether the shade will suit them. And it's, at the end of the day, it's cost prohibitive for a startup. And I think that larger organizations can incorporate these new tech innovations as a value add for their customers. But we're not there yet. And we want to have some semblance of scale and dominance in the region with our value proposition, because everything about us is organic. We don't want to jump on the bandwagon because we want to be too cool for school.
Right. So technology for you is not really about the fancy emerging technologies, and it's about what you're doing with what you have available. And your proposition right now is clean, organic, and it's product centric.
It's very product centric. It's skin concern centric. It's I often say that we're not pushing a vegan lifestyle. Some customers will ask us, is this vegan? Because it's a new buzzword. It doesn't have to be vegan, although I can tell you that it's halal certified or halal friendly, because it doesn't have any animal byproduce in it. But you don't want to paralyze the customer with too much data, which is why we're very careful about the way that we craft our communication across the different assets and channels. And like I said, at the moment we are able to understand our customer on the platform and how we should tailor make our value proposition to them. And eventually we will, when we launch our app, we will give the customer the ability to choose skincare that is tailor-made to their own skin concerns and working backwards from what they really need. Now, what technology we use is a matter of what is right for the platform, not what is trending.
Right. Speaking of buzzwords, though, the new cool buzzword for retail is omnichannel, and everyone's talking about it and throwing it around and using it interchangeably with multi-channel, which is not really the case. So in omnichannel, what at least we've gathered from doing all of these interviews in the past is it's simply about being where the customer wants you to be. So now that there are some traditional customers who still want to touch, feel, and see your product before buying it, would there be an option for that where you would perhaps set up kiosks or pop-ups in the larger retail spaces like malls, etc.? Is that something you're considering at all?
Well, we did have a very favorable experiment in February because we were invited by the first edition of Abu Dhabi Beauty Week in order to have our physical presence in the Yas Mall. And we did see a good resonance and recall there because we were also part of a panel that the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan put together with us to actually talk about what clean beauty means and how should customers be looking at their own regimen. We did see that it has legs, but given that we want to be cautious in the way that we expand, for now the value proposition will only be digital.
Right.
And answering your second question is that how do you circumvent the need of customers wanting to try and sample different products? We always send luxury minis and gift with purchases of other brands in your box, regardless of what you've bought, so that you can sample them, because we find that that really works.
Yeah.
Because the customer then comes back and buys the full size from the platform.
Sure. Like globally, this is the trend we've been seeing, right? With a lot of traditional retailers going online, starting their own e-commerce platforms. Now, e-commerce players have seen that now that is again, they're coming into the competition sphere, so they need to be in the physical world too.
I think that it's going to take some time because of the reality of the times that we live in. I do not believe that online brands are in a hurry to have a physical presence right now. It's cost prohibitive, it's labor intensive. I also think that given the reality of our region here, not just that we're in the middle of COVID, but also because it's the summers. I know people run to the malls because the malls are really cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much shopping is happening because most of the shopping is happening online. I'm very comfortable with not having a physical space right now. But having said that, in the very earlier version of the Secret Skin Charter, I do have a vision of having a presence. Less than a store, more so a hub for the community to engage, experience, and discover products, but also have conversations around nutrition and healing, and have sessions, to demo the product, but also to engage and, let's say, meditate or get expert advice from nutritionists, for example.
Yeah.
So I think that it's more a holistic rather than a transactional space that I want to create. It's a concept more than a store.
And that is a theme we've been noticing with a lot of the other e-commerce players as well, right? They've realized that now there is no point of just adding more products into the market because products are available. So like I was telling you a little bit earlier, Mum's World, their proposition is product, it's content and community. And it's not just products. All said and done, expectation and experience need to meet at some point, like customer expectation and the experience you provide. So in those lines, would you also have plans of creating something more than a product proposition and have other arms and verticals?
Yes, there's a lot of things in the pipeline that I can't talk about at the moment. But we have, I would like to say, surprised the industry in the last 8 months. And we've made advances a lot earlier than we had expected. For example, we thought that we would roll out to Oman and Kuwait much later. But we did that a couple of months ago, and we see the audience base growing. We see the desire from the customer base for safer products increasing. And it's nice to see, although it's competition, but it's also nice to see more and more platforms bringing in brands so that customers can switch. I always feel that it's not like a competition. When it comes to clean beauty and sustainability, there's a lot of, it's like a buffet. There's a lot of space around the table.
Yeah.
But you will see from Secret Skin expansion into a few other streams that we are currently working on. Our focus was launching the MVP, which happened in October, I apologize, in October. And it's been about 7 months where we've built a lot of insights and data around our customers, around pricing, around what works in this region, what doesn't work. And also, given that no one spends more on personal care and beauty in this region than any other part of the world, there is a huge influx of brands who want to come here. However, they need somebody on ground. So we are strengthening our position, our moat around the fort, as in being defensible, is being like a full stack service provider, less retailer, but more like a partner, where we can build the voice of the brand here and also speak the same language in terms of what they're trying to do in building their sustainable brand and create this whole legacy of mindfulness and conscious beauty.
So can I call you an online department store then, where you're trying to bring in all of these international brands together under one platform, under one umbrella?
No, because I wouldn't categorize them as different departments. I think IKEA is a departmental store. We're more an e-commerce discovery platform. Where you can come in and basically everybody uses personal care. Even if you don't buy very expensive serums for your face and you're a gentleman, you would still need your shampoo, deodorant, conditioner, and you still want to be clean and you want to be healthy. So we want to demystify it and we want to make it accessible. The idea is about being relatable as well, because we want consumers to not feel intimidated by the value proposition that Secret Skin offers, but for it to more be like a community platform which caters to all your needs in beauty and personal care. It's more holistic than just buying personal care products.
Great. And the last 8 months, I'm sure you've had your own challenges in setting up and the entire process of getting the word out of this new business model that you have. What would you say were the main challenges that you're still trying to tackle?
Well, I think that for any new business, even though you have a great idea, which is born by a need as well as an opportunity that exists in the market gap, if you check those boxes, then you're primarily living, breathing, sleeping, being obsessive about your idea to give it legs. Once you have a customer base which is building and a product proposition and a catalog that is building, you learn to identify what your USP is and what you should be playing at and playing to your strengths, instead of being confused and distracted in doing a lot of different things at the same time in order to scale. So the first challenge was launching, which we launched, and then the second challenge was how do you get the right team in place. And because it was COVID, it was important for us to leverage all our effort in people that were not necessarily present in the same region. So we were working across different time zones. And always for a founder, it's important to have the ammunition, which is the teams. So we made the right decisions and we hire more for attitude than skill set. And we were able to bring together a small team of people who were as focused, as data centric, and as passionate about Secret Skin as I was.
And is the company self-funded or?
So that's what I was coming to next, that once you have the ammunition in place, you need fuel. And the fuel is, obviously it's a capital intensive business in the beginning, and how do you fund it? So it was self-funded as well, and we had pre-seed. We had a first investor that came in before the platform launched, and now we have 2 new investors, and I'm very proud to share that they're women and they're local. So we've just launched a new round for seed, and we hope to close the round soon. The idea is not just a paycheck, it's also what else you're bringing to the table in terms of advice or optimizing your, let's say, your marketing costs, or helping you with commercials, or helping you to optimize your supply chain. So we always look for advisors and mentors who have a lot of experience in the industry that we are trying to leverage, which is the beauty industry. We've been really fortunate. We have the CEO of P&G on the board. We have leaders from Amazon Fashion, from Estee Lauder. So we have the right advisors and the team in place. So using biosynthetic ingredients represents huge gains for the company over a long period of time, because you're reducing your transport costs, you're reducing your risk of supply chain, as well as decreasing the emissions in the environment. So I think that this is a focus that we see more and more. And other than personalization that we already talked about, where brands are being pushed to find the right balance between preserving privacy and still innovating for new revenue streams, I think that it's also going to be important for brands to become more and more mindful of the packaging that they're putting together. So you see a lot of refillables, you see waterless technology as well, which is anhydrous compositions, where powder-based products that completely eradicate the need of water altogether being produced by smaller indie brands. Because the thought process is also that there is a larger concentration of product on the skin surface if it's not diluted. So it's interesting. There are some that are driven purely by technology and the need to innovate and differentiate as the world progresses more towards a different era of technology. And while there are some trends that are purely driven by what's happening in the social, political, and cultural aspect of our times, because you can't be tone deaf to the cultural need of the hour. And we see more and more organizations like a Sephora or an Ulta create grants for founders of color. You see more and more makeup brands coming out with inclusive shades in order to bring together the virality of the topic, as well as to create a community that is less defined by norms of gender and social conditioning.
Exactly.
That is something that I'm really looking forward to as well. So one aspect is the whole biotechnology and the AI enablement and the personalization. And on the other hand, I feel that there's never been a better time for new beauty founders to create something that has never existed before for an audience that has not existed before.
Exactly. Like that's what we've been seeing, and data has helped us give all of this information that Gen Z especially, they're looking for brands that are purpose-driven, that are socially more conscious and environmentally more conscious and all of that, and which is great, and which is what brands also need to adapt to. But on the other side of things, in terms of the immediate trends that retailers are getting into, such as subscription-based models and building loyal customers. So is that something that we need to see more of in this region, and doing loyalty right, perhaps?
I don't think this is a trend. I feel it's your basic bread and butter. A trend is when something is new and you wait to see whether the market adapts to it and whether the customers adopt to it. But this is more a staple of any business, whether you're online or offline.
Right.
How are you engaging the customer audience that you already have? How are you getting your customers to come back? We have a repeat rate of 38 to 40%. 40% of our customers come back, and we find that our basket sizes are about 2.6. Not only are customers buying and replenishing what they bought in their previous order, but they're also experimenting with new things which they probably discovered as a part of the GWP that went in their box when they purchased it. Customer loyalty is important because the attention span is low. They can be a bigger, better player which has a more interesting, unique marketing proposition, and your customer can go there. Or the platform could be selling the same product because it's not exclusive to you, but at a lower price. So we find that there is a huge difference between the way men buy and the way that women buy, because women like to experiment. And yet women that are older don't experiment, because by now they've realized what works for their skin and what doesn't. So how do you engage this vast variety of customers of different ages, of different spend propensity, of different behavioral patterns and different skin type? How do you keep them all close and keep giving them opportunities to come back? It's content marketing. How are you addressing them through Instagram, through videos and reels? We've started doing a lot of reels lately. because it's the trend, it's the hot new thing,
Yeah.
right? Or the emailers that they receive, or when they, you know that the customers come to you twice in the last couple of months, how are you going back and giving them something that the other customer doesn't get? The customer might be new. Loyalty programs are important, and what I find as a customer as well as a CEO, I don't think that they're done right. So again, the devil is in the details. A customer wants to feel good about the points that they may have, eco reward points that they may have earned on the basis of their spend, because there is an ROI associated with it.
Yeah.
And if that is too small, then your customer is dissatisfied and the customer feels that it's as good as not giving me anything at all.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you're always coming up with new innovative opportunities for the customer to come back to you. How often are you refreshing your content? I mean, since this is a conversation about data, if the content on the platform is not refreshed, the customer is going to come back and see the same thing and get bored.
Yeah.
Or the customer is going to feel that you don't have a lot of products that you can churn out. So content is king. But also the reason why companies like Amazon do really well is because they have a wide variety of things. It's called the A to Z store, the everything store.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to give our customers everything, a top to toe offering from different parts of the world, across the different categories and across different price points. So loyalty is not just how many points you're giving back for their purchase. Loyalty is how do you recognize what they think is important, and how do you keep going back to them and tailoring your proposition in order to address what they want.
Right.
We have customers who will ask us what is the expiry date on the product, and we know that the customer will not buy a product that's expiring even if it's like 6 to 8 months from now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we have people with very, very unique asks. We
Yeah.
have customers who will be so loyal to one brand that if you're out of stock, they will wait until you restock and then they will buy it the same day.
Oh, wow.
So that's loyalty for me.
Yeah. And great. So loyalty, again, it's about how it's being done and conducted in this region, right?
Yes.
A lot of people still don't seem to get it right, and it's the traditional retailers who've got their traditional loyalty schemes and programs that are still trying to find a way to work around it. So do you think there is a formula right now to get loyalty right?
So again, like I said earlier, the formula is so specific to the product that you have. So I know what I can do with my customers' content on Instagram is not something like your bricks and mortar retailer can do, because their customers not going into the store and doing a reel or sending a video to be featured on your gram.
Yeah.
Whereas we have customers who will create reels specifically and speak in Arabic and send us the content, which we will then create a reel out of. So then it just became an activation saying that if you want to be featured on the gram, then review our product, review your purchase,
Yeah.
and win that opportunity. And we have that on the gram. But now again, you have to move with the times.
Yeah.
I don't think that the customers are able to do very much in a brick and mortar store what you can do online with the tools that you have at hand.
I mean, but that is changing, right? Like brick and mortar stores are becoming experiential venues. They're not really places for transaction anymore, because transaction is taking place on the phone. The element of social is so important, because today customers aren't just customers, they're also your audience. For the content that you have to share. But thanks so much, Anisha, for joining us here and sharing
Thank
all of
you.
those valuable insights. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you to all the viewers for joining us once again on Up to Data. We will be back again next week. See you.